Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. It's me, Johnny Vedmore, and we're going to do a Johnny Vedmore read through. Oh my god, it's true. This week it's going to be Bill Gates, the genetics of Bill Gates. Very clever little article, very clever little article. I remember before I watched this, I was watching the rundown, before I read this, sorry. Before I wrote this, where is my brain today? Before I wrote this article, I was watching James Corbett and some of the other history behind Bill Gates, and they were very interested about uh, William H. Gates the third and William H. Gates the second and William H. Gates the first. Yes, they were very. But were they interested in William F. Gates from the 1200s or whenever it was, or 1100s? You know, this is what I wanted to know. I wanted to know who was before those eugenicists. There's got to be someone. You don't just go back to Joseph Stanton Gates before the line of William H. Gates. The three lines of William H. Gates. You don't go back to Joseph Stanton Gates and then not find anything. This is the richest man in the world. This guy's got to be connected. Surely he's got to be connected. If we believe the system that we say exists, then we think they're all connected. That Bill Gates, the only reason he would have come to prominence is because he'd be connected with powerful people all over the place by bloodlines. Surely that's what we're putting forward, isn't it? And I was like, Bill Gates, though, looks like the type who'd be into bloodlines, if you know what I mean. Looks like the type who's in a club. And I wanted to go back. And I didn't really expect to. I kind of did, you know, I do with these things. Like I say, it's a process. It's the process we're going through. We think something's true, and if we analyze that thing and it turns out to be true, then we go, huh, look at that. Bill Gates has got a swanky bloodline. And then we have proven the theory and the thesis that is ever present and what people believe. We have proven a part of it, and then we can go on to the next part. And we can say, well, we were right about that. So what else are we right about? That's important. It's fallacy to think we'll be right about everything, that's for sure. But if you want to think, oh well, if you want to have a person who you think is related to the rich and famous of society, the elite of society, then there's no better place to start than one of the most wealthiest landowners ahead of the technological revolutions, Bill Gates. That's really important, isn't it? Landowners. Do these people have a want to own you, control you, or do they want to have a want to own land so they can control you? Because they've been doing this for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. Thousands of years. Thousands of years. About 1,000 well recorded, you know? As soon as we start to look at things like Magna Carta and stuff, we start to understand the idea of representation. But you go back to the Domesday Book, then you're able to see who is officially in charge of land. And we saw, I mean, for us in Britain, and Bill Gates in Britain, in a sense, because that's where we're going to go back to during his ancestry. Some of the ancestry was related to William the Conqueror's rule, because William the Conqueror took over, and basically every bit of land had then a new landowner, except for one, which was Lady Godiva. Did you know that William the Conqueror left Lady Godiva in place when he invaded England? Only for a little bit, but still, she was the only one still allowed to keep her plot of land. Famous back then, as well as famous today. Let us go. We're at johnnyvedmore.com. Look, there's johnnyvedmore.com. Johnnyvedmore.com looks different now. I changed it just now. I went, bop, 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 and in no time I had changed it. So it's probably got a couple of little bugs here and there. Who knows? You got a search bar at the top now. You can buy me a coffee straight off. Do it. Do it. Buy me a coffee. Become a patron. Help support the work. If you help support the work, if even on this, if it's on YouTube or whatnot, if you just go tick tock tick and give me a cent or two, then I will be able to live and continue doing this. And this is what I'm aiming for. I don't get paid by anyone big. I have no big contracts. I am paid by loads of little people all over the place. That's how I want to keep it, because I've seen how that corrupts others and I don't want to go there really. It'd be nice to find someone who says, be an objective journalist, here's a load of funding. That would be nice. But what's the chances of someone coming along and say, being an objective journalist? So that objective journalism thing is the issue for them. And so Johnny Vedmore looks a little bit different now. You can now scroll down. You'll see there's loads of different little cubes there you could touch on, and there's a couple of keywords here. If you wanted to click, they'll take you, and you can become a patron or buy me a coffee, or the rest of it is a very quick one. That's what johnnyvedmore.com is looking like now. And on johnnyvedmore.com is the genetics of Bill Gates. So because I've just changed it round, it means some of the formatting, like this top, it's got uncategorized written on the top. So things like that have got to come off, but c'est la vie. And it gives you a little bit of the intro before it actually gives you the article. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to read the genetics of Bill Gates. Don't expect a science article here. No, expect treason, decapitation, exile, slavery, and hiding the links to Israel. Gates. Yes, it's a cheeky one. Very interesting. Very interesting. Oh, here we go. Look at this. There he is. It was really hard to get him to hold that book, but there you go. The genetics of Bill Gates: treason, decapitation, exile, slavery, and hiding the links to Israel. Gates. I enjoy researching family histories. I'm always fascinated by how genes express themselves from generation to generation. We are the same creatures as our ancestors were, even though we may have become healthier, more savvy, and live in a very different reality from our distant relatives, doesn't mean we can't learn anything from their journey. In fact, the process of researching your own family tree will often lead you to feeling as though you've been looking in a mirror. If you go back far enough, you may even come across yourself. On this occasion, I was motivated by the many people who were researching Bill Gates, also known as William H. Gates III. Preliminary investigations led me to the conclusion that no one had gone further back than 1806. But this wasn't really the case. In reality, the family history was everywhere, but it was fractured and disconnected. It soon became apparent that many researchers had missed some big connections, and that others seemed to be purposely leading people in the wrong direction. But the story of Bill Gates' genetic journey is full of both necessary misdirection and peculiar happenstance. It is a tale of kings and knights, treason and slaughter, exodus and colonialism, slavery and war, and one massive family. Yeah, overpopulating the world. Bill Gates. Who would expect that Mr. Overpopulation is overpopulating the world? So, the genetic history of Bill Gates. We begin the story of Bill Gates' ancestry at the turn of the century, in the year 1300 AD. Thomas Gates was born in Essex, and he is as far back in the Gates family tree as I can trace. Thomas would also name his son Thomas, who was born in High Easter, Essex in 1325, but he would barely get a chance to know his heir. Thomas Gates Sr. died 2 years after the birth of his son in 1327. It was the same year in which a newly crowned King Edward III would lose against the Scottish in the Battle of Stanhope. There is little evidence of what did end the life of Thomas Gates, but these were turbulent times in English history, so there are many ways in which a 27-year-old could meet their doom. The 1300s is not the most fruitful time for public records, but we can gather that the young Thomas Gates fathered the first recorded William Gates of the Gates family, William F. Gates, born around 1375. As we enter the 1400s, we discover that the Gates family is from fine stock. Around 1401, William F. Gates welcomed his son Geoffrey Gates into the world. Eventually, he would become Sir Geoffrey Gates and serve as a courtier to in the second reign of Edward IV. Sorry. Things were obviously getting better for the Gates dynasty before it was about to get unimaginably worse. Sir Geoffrey Gates' son, another William Gates, would only live until the age of 35, born around 1450 and dying on the 16th of October 1485, just a few years after the birth of his son, who would also eventually be titled Sir Geoffrey Gates. Sir Geoffrey Gates I was born about 1481 and married Elizabeth Clopton in Kentwell in 1500. This era is very well documented in comparison to the previous centuries. Sir Geoffrey Gates I would have 8 children, most notably Sir John Gates MP, Sir Henry Gates MP, and Sir Geoffrey Gates II. We'll be following the line of Sir Geoffrey Gates II to meet up with the billionaire creator of Microsoft. But to understand why he and his brother were eventually executed, we should look at the more well-documented story of his brother, Sir John Gates. As the funeral procession, carrying the body of Henry VIII, moved through his kingdom and to its final resting place, Sir John Gates proudly rode on horseback beside the corpse of his beloved king. This was a somber day for the loyal courtier of the recently deceased monarch. He had made his fortune thanks to some shrewd dealings, but mainly with the help of the chubby ruler. When King Henry ordered the dissolution of the monasteries, Sir John Gates managed to take control of many former church buildings all across Essex, including the famous Beeley Abbey. Now, in January 1547, came the short 6-year reign of Henry VIII's son, who was crowned King Edward VI. When Edward VI came to the throne, he was only 9 years old, so his courtiers were extremely influential. Sir John Gates and his brother, Sir Henry Gates, and Sir Geoffrey Gates II had the young king's ear. They were 3 of the most powerful men in the realm, but when the young king became sick at 15 years of age, then came the realization to all these men, that his Catholic sister, Mary Tudor, was next in line to the throne. There was a plot devised by the king himself and his closest advisors to place his cousin, Lady Jane Grey, on the throne at his death. However, when he died, the plot fell apart and Mary Tudor was made Queen of England. I always say Jane Seymour. I can't help it. I always say Jane Seymour because, I have to get in my head. Lady Jane Grey. Of course it's Lady Jane Grey. Can't remember that. Lady Jane Grey. Everybody remember that for me. Remind me if I say it sometime. Over 2 decades before the reign of Mary, Geoffrey Gates III had been born in 1530, and he is recorded as marrying Joan Wentworth, who was the granddaughter of Sir Henry Wentworth. Joan and Geoffrey married in 1550, and Peter Gates was soon born shortly after. Then came the reign of Bloody Queen Mary, and the Gates family were some of the first to suffer the consequences. Mary became infamous for her savage executions, and one of her first set of victims were those who had taken part in the plot to keep her from the throne. Sir John Gates, Sir Geoffrey Gates II, and his wife Deol Gates, née Pascal, were executed on the 22nd of August, 1553, in front of a small crowd. This is that's the day after Mary Tudor Bloody Queen Mary took the throne. Her first thing that she did was see Sir John Gates, Sir Geoffrey Gates, Dion Gates, and a few others get executed. Over the following centuries, people would say the headless ghost of Sir John Gates could be seen roaming Beeley Abbey on the anniversary of his death. Sir John, saith the Duke, God have mercy upon us, for this day shall end both our lives. And I pray you forgive me whatsoever I have offended, and I forgive you with all my heart, although you and your counsel was a great occasion hereof. Well, my lord, saith Sir John Gates, I forgive you as I would be forgiven, and yet you and your authority was the only original cause of altogether, but the Lord pardon you, and I pray you forgive me. So either making obeisance to each other, the Duke proceeded towards the scaffold. That's an actual quote there from the time. Sir Geoffrey Gates II and his wife Dion had at least 4 sons who were swiftly hidden and had been named John Gates, Geoffrey Gates III, Henry Gates, and Anthony Gates. As you can imagine, the Gates family members, who were located mainly across Essex, were shaken to the core by a gruesome public death of the most high-ranking members of the family, The records suggest that some members of the family went straight into hiding at this point, and it is here where things become a little sketchy. Many researchers who have been following these ancestral trees seem to make a very simple error. They don't view the evidence in context of the events of the time, and this makes anomalies harder to recognize. Mary I had been left vast estates in East Anglia by her father, which were previously confiscated from the Duke of Norfolk, Thomas Howard, by Henry VIII. She spent the years leading up to her rule living close to Malden on the Essex coast. Her location put her just a couple of miles away from Beeley Abbey, one of the many church properties gained by Sir John Gates from Henry VIII's separation from Rome and the Catholic Church. These wealthy knights of the realm were part of the court that had denounced Mary Tudor's right of succession and almost destroyed Catholicism in England. I mean, if you want to pick a fight, with bloody Queen Mary about Catholicism. Wow, Catholicism, wow. I've been quoted before. You don't want to do that? I don't think it'll end well for you. Oh, well. Peter Gates, who had been born around January 1548, was the penultimate generation of Gates to be born in High Easter in Essex, a place that had been home to many generations of the Gates family beforehand. Their new base would become Coney Weston in Suffolk, about 40 miles north of their original homestead, and there is evidence to suggest that they changed their name for a short period after the massacre of 1553. One of Peter Gates' sons from the final generation of Gates family to reside in High Easter was Eustace Gates, who was born in about 1569. Eustace didn't go by the name Gates for all of his life. He also called himself Eustace Jacks and Eustace Jates. And as you see in the spelling, if you're listening to this, Jaquues or Jayuettees. So like Gates, but Yates. The latter is even written on his gravestone, and Eustace also referred to his sons with the same surname in public documentation, such as his last will and testaments from the 15th of March, 1626. Eustace Jacks of Coney Weston, labourer, named Rose Jacks, my wife Rose Jacks, Ellis Jacks, Mary Jacks the elder, and Mary Jacks the younger, my 4 daughters. William Jacks, Thomas Jacks, Stephen Jacks, and Simon Jack, my 4 sons. My brother-in-law William Wright of Great Ellingham, in the county of North Yeoman. All of his children soon returned to using the Gates name, but there was still obviously the troubling psychological scars of the recent political and religious persecution. Mary I was only on the throne from 1553 until 1558, when Elizabeth I began her reign. But by that time, the Protestant Gates family no longer felt safe in England. In fact, they moved as far away as possible very soon after. Migration to America. One of Eustace's sons, Stephen Gates I, who was born in Coney Weston sometime just before the 26th of December 1597, took his family on an epic voyage to the New World. He was part of the Great Puritan Migration that began to colonize foreign land on behalf of Queen Elizabeth I. He migrated on a ship called the Diligent in 1638 and arrived in Boston on the 10th of August of that same year. The colony of Massachusetts had only been founded in 1628, so the early colonists were entering a rough and rugged way of life that was fraught with new dangers. But it was written that there were more than just a couple of problems back home in Britain. The Gates blood was of tropical nature. Daughter Mary boldly contradicted the minister in public. Stephen quarrelled with neighbours. The Whitcombes, who was deprived of a constable's staff and left Lancaster, son, trying unsuccessfully to break his will. A hard one to read, but that's how it's actually written in the book. That book is actually about Stephen Gates's journey. The Gates family at first settled in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Stephen Gates I eventually died on the 29th of September 1662. Stephen and his wife Anne Neve, who was also from Coney Weston, had 7 children together. Massive families. 2 of them, Rebecca and Isaac, had died in England before they reached 6 years of age. The others were Mary, Adele, Elizabeth, Stephen, Thomas, and Simon. We're going to follow Thomas Gates, who was born sometime before the 3rd of May, 1646. Thomas was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and eventually married Elizabeth Susan Freeman in her hometown of Sudbury, Massachusetts, on the 6th of July, 1670. Elizabeth and Thomas kept to the Gates tradition of enormous family units. They had 11 children between 1671 and 1693, 7 girls and 4 boys. One of those boys was called Caleb Gates and was born around 1693. Caleb Gates married Mary Forbes on the 6th of June, 1716, and they eventually moved to another of the 13 British colonies, Connecticut. They also had a very large family. 10 children were registered to Caleb and Mary Gates in Preston City, New London. In this case, the 10 children were Thomas, Joshua, Jesse, Sarah, Jonathan, Eunice, Nathan, Mary, Caleb, and the youngest was Simon Gates. The young Simon Gates, who was born the 15th of September 1724, eventually became Ensign Simon Gates and married 2 women during his lifetime. One of his wives was named Olive, but her family name and fate are not clear. But Ensign Simon Gates' marriage to Prudence Billings, who was born around 1731, would prove to be much more fruitful. Prudence and Simon recorded having 6 children, and all their names hinted at strong religious family unit. Their children were called Mary, Asa, Caleb, Israel, Elijah, Ephraim, and Ephraim, sorry. The family also moved to West Greenwich, Kent County, in the colony of Rhode Island of Providence Plantations. Rhode Island had evolved into a colony which held on strongly to belief of freedom to practice one's religion. This became a popular destination for many different religious minorities. Ensign Simon Gates died in 1774, aged around 50 years of age. He had answered the call to revolt against British rule, as did his brother Caleb Gates and Asa Gates. Hiding links to Israel. I'm just going to take a quick sip. Like, share, subscribe. Um, Donate me a buck or two if you possibly can. I would love that. I got so much more to do. I just need funding to be able to do it. So all the help you can give is appreciated. I'll try and keep making all of these articles more digestible as well, because some of them I have to break up and do different things with, make documentaries into and stuff so that people can really understand what's going on. Hide in links to Israel. This is classic. As we approach the more modern Gates family history, we should ask the obvious question. Why do the vast majority of the sources currently claim that Bill Gates' ancestry is only traceable as far as Joseph Stanton Gates in 1806? Joseph Stanton Gates' father is fully traceable. So why would professionals ignore Joseph's links to Israel? Israel Gates was supposedly born in 1764 in the colony of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. He had three children with his wife, Ruth Eunice Gates, and that is a relatively small family for the Gates genetics. Their first child's name is Asa Gates. The second, they named Thomas Jefferson Gates, and the final child is Joseph Stanton Gates. The first piece of awkward information, here we go. So, not only were they despots who tried to overthrow the ruling government and were influential on the king's life and a lot more, but listen to this. The first piece of awkward information you can learn about this section of the family is that Ruth Eunice Gates doesn't have a different maiden name. In fact, Ruth and Israel are related to each other. And she already come from the same family line as Israel. Her great-grandfather was Stephen Gates II, son of the original Stephen Gates I, who migrated to the first of the 13 colonies over a century before. This sort of incest was completely normalized in those days, so officially there's nothing to see here. But a little bit of light historical incest shouldn't put a researcher off discovering the lineage of one of the richest and most powerful men on earth. So, what was Israel Gates doing in the 18th and 19th century that could cause people to whitewash him from history? What was he doing? Why would you not want to know who Israel Gates is and what he's doing? I'm sure. I'm sure. Oh, it's funny. It's not. It's really not funny. That's why it's so funny. In Israel's time, Newport was the major center of the slave trade in early America. Slave-produced sugar and molasses from Caribbean was shipped to Rhode Island and were then distilled into rum, which was then sent back to West Africa to be exchanged for more captured African slaves. In 1754, when Israel Gates was born, Rhode Island had about 30 rum distilleries, 22 in Newport alone. Around 60% of slave trading voyages which were launched from North America were issued from Rhode Island, in some years more than 90%, and many from Newport. Almost half the men, women, and children were trafficked illegally, often breaking the 1787 state law prohibiting residents of the state from trading in slaves. Rhode Island was one of the main hubs of the global slave trade, and in Israel's lifetime, this would become an illegal activity. Joseph Stanton Gates was also referred to as Joseph L. Gates and was born in around 1806. He married Martha P. Scatterly on the 5th of January 1863 in Delmar, Tioga, Pennsylvania. Martha Scatterly, born the 10th of May 1823, was 40 years old when she married. But according to the birth certificate of their only child, William H. Gates, the couple had William on the 22nd of January 1860, 3 years before they tied the knot. This is probably due to the country being on the cusp of the American Civil War, which began in 1861. Joseph Stanton Gates stayed living near the east coast of America and would be the first Gates to move to Seattle in Washington state. Oh, he would not stay on the East Coast, and he moved to Seattle. He went on to father Florence Martha Gates, William Henry Gates Sr., and Pearl Ann Gates. William Henry Gates Sr., who would also call his son William H. Gates, is the grandfather of Bill Gates. There you go. There you go. The line. The Gates family went viral. I'm not going to explain to you the life and times of Bill Gates' immediate family. I will leave you to do your own research if you wish to know more. Instead, I wanted to discover what led us to this man who we call Bill Gates. This is a man who talks about the dangers of overpopulation, but it's clear that the Gates genetics spread in a very similar manner to a virus. One generation of the Gates family often had up to 11 children per household. 11. When I have followed other branches of their family tree, I've discovered equally powerful and wealthy members of the extended family. It appears as though Bill Gates is related to George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush on their mother's side, and also to Harry Truman, among many others. This very wealthy family is connected to all the other wealthy families who surround them. During my research, I came across tons of errors, misinformation, and missing links. Many of the dates had to be rechecked and verified over and over because before the true picture emerged. The execution of Sir John Gates on the 22nd of August, 1553 is well known, but the fact that Sir Geoffrey Gates and his wife Deo Gates were executed on the same day has never been alluded to. This was partly because people have made the error with Deo Gates' year of death. If the most powerful people in your family are beheaded by a reigning monarch, then it's quite normal to expect other members of the family would go into hiding. Researchers didn't seem to realize that the anomalies in tracing that part of the Gates family history was because of the repercussions of the reign of bloody Queen Mary. During such tumultuous times, some Protestant families held off baptisms, weddings, and other Protestant religious ceremonies. Many researchers seem to assume that the dates of a baptism is the same date of birth, but this simplistic calculation can mean that dates become muddled and you end up discounting or simply overlooking crucial information. Have a drink. The Gates family had always aimed to be in a position of power. Their lineage contains so many knights of the realm that I had to eventually stop counting. Their family history is one of affluence, privilege, and the grasping of great opportunities. When the East Anglian family fled England, so did almost 50% of their county and many other English families. This sudden migration caused reverberations throughout England, which crescendoed into the English Civil War. The Gates family jumped out of the frying pan and, in heading to America, jumped into the fire. I wasn't able to find out whether or not the Gates family were part of the slave trade when they moved to Newport, Rhode Island, but it is clear that they moved during the peak of the American slave trade. The wealthy and powerful families of this relatively recently founded country that calls itself the USA are all connected by their bloodlines, and their hunger for power persists over many generations. History tends to repeat itself, and if that's true, then maybe Bill Gates could one day find his head resting on the chopping block. That you can share that article. And someone said something in another language. You can share that article. Of course, you can become a patron or buy me a coffee or whatnot, and all of that. Let's see if these, if I got this linked up right. I should have this linked up right. Ancestry of presidents, doobie doobie doo. It's very exciting. Look, we're in the family period. We're in the Familypedia. Don't get that wrong. And you see, we got all of these people who are members who are, of course, see, they're all presidents listed. Who's having the trouble, yeah. And it's showing us 30 generations. It's showing us George Bush's lineage. We've got an advert coming up. That's why it's blocking us. It's a bit of an old site. So you see how it's got George Walker Bush open. And it's got Herbert Hoover open as well for some reason. But if we go and we search, so if we put on, oh, no, there you go. That's what we want. If we have a little search of what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for Gates. Oh, Mark Gates, 2071. In the future. No. Stephen Gates. There you go. Stephen Gates, 1599. Talking Thomas Gates. Yes, Thomas Gates. Yes. Peter Gates. Yes. Jeffrey Gates. There you go. Jeffrey Gates again. We're going back all the way, and there's a few more. Jeffrey Gates, William Gates. I found this at the end. It would have been good to find this at the beginning, but I didn't realize that they were related to president. Who thinks that someone's related to a president? I should have realized, but that is it's having real trouble loading. But that is the ancestors. So we're down. You see how it's like 14th generation ancestors of George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush, and it turns out Harry Truman as well. So Gates had lots of ancestors. It's an extremely interesting story. And there he is. There he is. Extremely interesting story. It kind of like echoes through time, doesn't it? It kind of shows you that the same people who are taking advantage of political turmoil to buy up land and own land are from the same people who did exactly the same behaviors in the past. That they connect themselves with the leaders of the world and leaders of countries so that they can benefit by having land given to them or during that turmoil, or have the ear of leaders so that they can introduce policy. That's what he's been doing. That's what his genetics has been doing. Then when you see that he was also, I'm gonna stop the share here. Blah, there you go. You can see my my chow chow, my lovely grey cat. So what you see with him is that he she loves it. She loves it. She's really loving it. When you go back in time, you end up in this place where slave trade, and it goes from the courts of kings and queens, riding alongside Henry VIII's coffin. I mean, that's amazing. Beheaded, exodus across the water, taking land for Queen Elizabeth, and of course the start of the colonies, and then being at the center of the slave trade and having massive families that go against all of the concepts that you hold, you push out. He doesn't hold those concepts. He pushed out today. So this massive, sprawling family, this virus on the landscape of America. Oh my God. And it's just the same old story, isn't it? Same old story happening all over again. And then ends up in the center of slave trade with a distant cousin, distant second, third cousin or something, having a little incestuous family while selling slaves and molasses. Unbelievable. Which is what you're going to find. And then what do you find? Oh, you go on to eugenicists because they know what people should be like, and they know, oh, we need to get rid of these people because there's too many of them, and they're having families where there's like between 7 and 11 in the families. Oh, it's so it's ironic. I mean, that's one of the good things is to know where these people come from, so you know that what they say is like, for you, it's not for them. They're dictators. They dictate, and we have to take it in and accept it and take the boop boop, take the shot, quick, take the shot for this guy, and then eventually someone comes along and says, "Ooh, that's over," and then they got to scatter and go into hiding. So let it give you some form of hope that these sort of despots and these evil people, that eventually when they manifest true, when they manifest evil stuff, evil finds a way to find it too, because it's not like Mary, bloody Queen Mary, was a nice one. Mm-mm-mm. So there you go. History. I promised you treason. I promised you execution. I promised you slave trade. I promised you everything, didn't I? And what do you get? You get Sir John Gates, Sir Geoffrey Gates, the second and third, and you get the old Gates getting their heads chopped off. And Sir John Gates, headless corpse, forever wandering Beely Abbey. And on that note, like, share, subscribe, donate if you can. Thank you for joining me on this Johnny Vedmore read through. Bye-bye.
Young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets.